All right, everyone. Hello, how's it going? I'm Sankap. This is a live stream. It's a bit of an experiment. Look what I have. Look what I have here. Woo, I can actually write here. So that is exciting. That is amazing. So in this video, I'm going to talk about, let me get myself on here. Look how awesome all of this is. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to think clearly. Now, this video is inspired by world events and the media coverage around world events. So, a lot has been happening around the world lately. There's conflicts and wars and things like that. And we often hear people describing their take on it, their opinions on it. Furthermore, there's elections in many, many countries next year. And so you'll have to give your vote to someone. And all of this makes us want to think clearly. Like, we need to think clearly. Otherwise, we might elect the wrong person. Otherwise, we may have an opinion on something that is not well founded. We might be persuaded by some people who may not be logically sound. So I break down thinking clearly into three big ideas. The first big idea is you need to know reason and logic. And so today I'm going to give you a crash course on reason and logic. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the idea that we are fallible, which means even though we might know what reason and logic is, we are emotional beings, we are irrational beings. And I'm going to talk a bit about that. And the third thing I'm going to talk about is the specific ways in which we are fallible. So not only does our minds mess up, but it messes up in predictable ways and we can get a hang of it. And what cognitive behavioral therapy has shown us is distorted patterns of thinking can lead to poor mental health. So in this project, where we are trying to improve our thinking, we are also implicitly improving our mental health, especially if we correct for cognitive distortions. So in this live stream with a bit of marker pen action, we're going to talk about all of these things. All right, let me just switch to this thing right here and talk about logic a little. And so the first thing we need to understand when we are understanding logic is what is a statement. A statement. So a statement is or a proposition. Proposition. So this is something that can be true or false. So for example, I could say it is raining outside. And this could be true or false. Now, I know this is not the best quality in terms of the writing and stuff like that, but hopefully, well, I think this camera moves. There you go. um, hopefully, it's good enough that you are able to pay attention and get value from it. And this is going to be a bit more of a more intense, serious, studious type of a video, less flashy that way. But anyway, it is raining outside is the statement. And now this statement could be true or it could be false. And that's by definition what a proposition is, which is something that could be true or false. Now in this case, today, it's false. It is not raining outside. Well, it was raining outside, but it is not raining outside right now. So which means this is false. This is false. This is not true. All right, let's go back. Yeah, this is false and this is not true. Let me see if I can make the image a little clearer. Let's see if I have any control over that. Maybe if I zoom out a little. Yeah, maybe this is better. Tell me, let me know later if it's better or not better. Anyway, so it's raining outside. That is false. So now what this can do, this sets up the right foundation for us. Now what we can do is we can start chaining propositions and therefore make arguments. So in any argument, there are two things. There is, so let's say I have an argument of the form of some statement A, some statement B, and therefore some statement C. So any argument has two things in it. One is what's called premises. Premises. These are our assumptions. What do we start from? And then we have the conclusion. So we start from some premises, and then we have a conclusion. So two things that are needed for an argument are premises. So we need to agree on something. So for example, if you and I think that education is important, that could be a premise. And from that premise, we could argue how much money that the government should spend on education. But if we do not agree that education is important, then we have a disagreement. Then we have a difference of opinion. So oftentimes when there are disagreements, when there are fights between people, there's only two things that could be different. Either their premises could be different, or the conclusion that they draw from these premises could be different. So either this could be different, or the conclusions drawn from the premises could be different. All right, so let's take a real life example. Like the ABC is a bit more abstract. So let's talk about some real life examples. So let's put in an if then statement, so to speak. Let's put in something like if cloudy. So if it is cloudy outside, and I'm going to avoid writing the whole thing. If cloudy, then rain. Well, actually, it should be the other way around. Whoopsie doopsie. So this is actually, in itself, it is not true, right? If it is cloudy, then it's not necessarily true that it should be raining. But if rain, then clouds. So I'm just writing the short form now, but what I mean in full is if it is raining outside, then it must be cloudy. There is no other way in which it could be raining outside, right? So if it is raining outside, then I could infer that it must be cloudy, and I don't even have to look at the clouds or the sky itself. I can just infer from the rain that it is cloudy. So this statement, hopefully you would agree, is false. If cloudy, then rain. That's not always true, but this statement is true. If it is raining, then there must be clouds outside. So this is the premise that we agree on. This is premise number one. Now let's say I have a second premise which says that it is raining outside. So let's say outside, right? So let's say I woke up in the morning and I saw that it is raining outside. What can I do after that? What can I infer from that? I can infer that it must be cloudy. How can I infer that? Because I know that if it's raining outside, then it is cloudy. And now I know that it is indeed raining outside. The first thing just says if it is raining outside. And the second thing says that, hey, look, I've observed that it's raining outside. So if this statement is true, then it necessarily follows that this statement is true. This is a very basic structure of logic. Which is a very basic form of an argument. Now, you could absolutely have a lot of premises and conclusions lined up. It could be a number of them, and mathematical proofs essentially are a bunch of premises followed by a conclusion. That's what theorems are. And this was a more simpler form. So arguments of this form, let's go right here. Arguments of this form, which is if A, then B. Arguments of this form and A, therefore B. These are the premises. This is the conclusion. Arguments of these forms are called modus ponens. I might be getting the spelling wrong. Modus ponens. And there's another related argument which is called modus tollens, which goes like this. If A, then B, not B, that this thing little here is not, therefore not A, therefore not A. So these are the premises, this is the conclusion. So the example with this example would be, if rain then clouds, if not clouds, then I can infer that it is raining, or it is not raining rather. So this is the conclusion. So if there are no clouds, then it can't be raining. Now, let's, I hope you can see this. Well, you can. Now, if someone says, if A, then B, and if someone says not A, does that mean it's not B? So this is true and this is true. This is not true, this is false. Take this example. So if rain, then clouds, and if not rain, does that mean it's clouds? No, this is what we found out here. If not rain, then not clouds is not true, because it could be cloudy and it might not be raining. This is not true. It's exactly the statement here, right? So if someone is using an argument of this form, then you should be able to point at them. You should be able to point at them and say that, look, if A, you're using the argument of the form if A then B, and you said not A, then that does not mean not B. And this is how you can think clearly. Now, of course, this was a toy example with 2 premises and 1 conclusions. You could have n number of premises, and therefore it gets more complicated. But this is the most basic structure of how an argument should be. And this is unfortunately not taught a lot in schools and colleges and university, unless you're doing philosophy or logic or that kind of thing. All right. So now what I'm going to talk about is, that was reason. But the second topic I'm going to talk about is we are fallible. So I'm going to call it the fallibility of the human mind, let's just say mind. And what I'm going to try and attempt to draw is a very badly drawn elephant. Well, very poorly drawn elephant. Let's give him a nice little, and I'm going to draw a rider on top of it. And the reason why I'm drawing this is because this is how the mind looks. And this is, by the way, an analogy by Jonathan Haidt, the social psychologist. And the idea with this is, your mind is like an elephant. This is your mind, and this is like a reason. This guy, this little dude or dudette at the top is like a reason. And so you have the elephant, you have the rider. I'm going to try and center myself here. You have the elephant and you have the rider on top of it. And reason is a bit like the rider. It's an emotion is more like the elephant, or your mind is like the elephant. And the elephant is big and it's out of your control. And so therefore, I hope I'm, I hope I was audible all this while. I'm going to increase my volume a little. Hopefully you can still hear me. Right. So, so the rider is like this. Let me show you this graphic. This very beautifully drawn graphic here. So you are like, the reason is like this, but most of our mind is like the elephant. It's like emotion which is driving things, and therefore we are all just privy to emotional reasoning, which is we feel a certain way and then we sort of cook up reasons to justify how we feel. So this is the problem, really. This is why we are not often rationals. And then the third thing I want to talk about is we are predictably irrational. Predictably irrational. We are predictably irrational. Now, what that means is there are certain ways in which we go wrong in our logic. And what we also know that when we are predictably irrational, or when we have a distorted worldview, then sometimes we may often have mental health difficulties, mental health challenges. Now, not all of it has to amount to a mental illness, but having distorted views of the world comes at a cost. And this is the insight of, I'm just going to draw this, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. All right, let's go to this side and let's talk about, well, I'm here. I'm here. How are you, everyone? Let's go back. I'm going to talk about cognitive distortions. So cognitive distortions. And okay. And so what CBT says is there are some ways in which we have distorted thinking, where we sort of mess up in our logic, and that thing is called cognitive distortions. There are many of them, and I'll put a link in the show notes to plenty of them, but I'm going to discuss the 4 ones that I think are pretty common and often affect our thinking when we are discussing or thinking through political issues or more serious personal issues. So the first one I'm going to talk about is, well, there's many names for it, but you could call it us versus them thinking. Thinking that I am a part of a team, people who disagree with me are part of another team, and therefore we just can't find middle ground. We are just enemies. And the moment you sort of label someone as an enemy, and I'm going to talk about labeling soon, that destroys the potential for all productive conversation. You cannot have a discussion anymore if you just simply disagree, and if you just simply think that like I am right and I'm us and they are that and they must be wrong. I think the more technical way to say this, and a more broader category, is dichotomous thinking. Things are either good or bad. Dichotomous thinking. So this is the thinking that, it's us versus them, or good or evil, virtuous and sinful. And this idea that people are either good or bad, people are either virtuous or sinful, people can be honorable or dishonorable. And this is not close to what reality is. We all have parts within us which are good, and then we have parts within us which are not so good. We have parts within us which are healthy and flourishing and thriving, and we have parts within ourselves which are a little bit off and gloomy and sometimes even dark. And so when we think of people, or when we think of things in like black and white categories which may not exist sometimes, well, oftentimes, then we are falling prey to a cognitive distortion, which is, in this case, the first one I said was us versus them. All right, the second one I'm going to talk about is labeling. Now this is, so I live in colleges, and colleges tend to be relatively left-leaning. And by the way, in this video or in general, I'm not trying to take any stance. I'm just taking examples on either side or no side really. My aim is to teach you logic and cognitive distortions, and not to really make any political claims, right? So this is just because I pick on one side doesn't mean I'm trying to endorse or not endorse any one side, just to be clear. Anyway, so colleges tend to be left-leaning, and I've heard this every now and then, which is, that person is just a conservative, so don't listen to them. That's the implication. Or, this person just belongs to this country, so don't listen to what these people say. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Now, I'm no conservative myself. I'm no party line. I don't align with any one particular thing myself. But when you label someone something, like let's say a conservative, then you are not giving any argument. You're just labeling them and using that as a convenient justification to not think. Using that as a convenient justification to not engage in an argument. So instead of saying, hey, that person is just X, they are just gym goers, and I don't trust gym goers for whatever reason, then there is no argument there. You should be like, hey, so why do you not trust them? Did they Did they come to your house and were they doing push-ups all day long, and did they not listen to you when you're being vulnerable? Maybe that's a reason for not trusting them. But just because someone is a gym goer doesn't mean anything about trust. And that label in itself doesn't justify anything. Now, of course, we give labels around good and evil, so that person is just bad. So it doesn't matter what they said, doesn't matter what their argument is, doesn't matter that they're smart, and doesn't matter that they are giving something that's reasonable, saying something that's reasonable. Doesn't matter, because they are just bad. They're just an evil person. She's just a slut. He's just an asshole. Well, I don't know how long I could say these things, because YouTube may have some restrictions. But you get the idea, right? You label someone something, and then you are no longer engaging with their worldview. You're no longer engaging with the idea. And that is indeed a cognitive distortion. All right, I'm going to go to a couple of ones very quickly, and then we'll end this live stream. Just two more. Okay, so the next one is emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning. Now this is this idea. So let me just put, he's just bad, as an example of that. Now, emotional reasoning is this idea that you don't look at reasons per se, but you just, and the focus is on just, consider your feelings. Now, of course, feelings are not bad. They are often indicative of what's happening in the world. So I'm not saying you should never listen to what's happening in your body. But that also does not mean that feelings are be all and end all, which means we can feel certain things sometimes when objectively those things might not be true. So let me give you an example. I am feeling very bad today, and therefore my relationship is not working out. This is an example of emotional reasoning. So you are using something that is going on in your body. Realign this. You're using something that is going on in your body and your mind, and you're making a logical leap, which is just because you're feeling bad today when you had your interaction with your partner, that does not mean your relationship in general is not working out. Like, you may be feeling bad because you had some fried chips yesterday, or you had something like a sugary treat or something like that. And these are all examples of emotional reasoning. So I will write down here, feel bad, feel sad, let's just say it. Therefore, I'm gonna say marriage, failing. So that's an example of, that's an example of emotional reasoning. And the final cognitive distortion that I'm going to talk about is, let's say, what should we talk about? Let's talk about catastrophization. Catastrophizing. And this is the idea that you think about the worst case scenario. So you think about something like, so let's say I actually recorded this exact video earlier and the audio didn't work out. And so I can imagine if you watch that video, some of you might have said, audio didn't work out. And what you might be doing is just gently and carefully pointing it out to me that something is not working out. But if I am in my cognitive distortion mode and I'm indeed catastrophizing, then I might think something like, hey, I'm just a loser. So I might go from, hey, look, the audio doesn't work out, to I'm just such a loser, and then everything is not working out and no one will watch these videos ever. Now that is catastrophizing. That is thinking of the worst case scenario. So I'm going to write it down here. Catastrophe is a bad thing happening. And so you just think that bad things, like really bad things are going to happen, even if there's a small trigger. So worst case scenario thinking. And an example of that would be audio not working, audio fail, implies I am a loser, plus I'll never get views. I'm just going to write no views. Yeah, well. So if you're watching this video, I'm pointing at you, look. So if you are watching this video, and I already have one view, so my catastrophic thinking was wrong. It was inaccurate. And the suffering I had as a result of it was unfounded. It was optional, in other words. What I could have done is just recognize that, hey, look, I have this tendency, like my mind has this natural tendency to catastrophize, to go through the worst case scenario. And it's just saying something out of that distortion. It's not actually true. And I can challenge my mind when it does cognitive distortions. You see, this is the beauty of it. It's not just our mind, falls into these various cognitive traps and it's just run by this elephant and us versus them and labeling and emotional reasoning and catastrophizing. It's not just that this happens, but in fact, I have control. I have control and I can intervene. I can notice that I'm privy to cognitive distortions and I can notice that. And therefore, I can step in at the right time and avoid myself some unnecessary suffering. In other words, I can challenge my cognitive distortions. So hopefully you learned something during this live stream. Just going to do a quick recap. We started with what a proposition and a statement is, which is anything that could be true or false. Now, once we have statements, then we can change statements together into premises, and premises taken together could make a conclusion. Now, people, when they disagree, could either disagree on the premises or they could disagree on the conclusion that you draw from these premises. Now here's an example. If cloudy then rain, that's not true, because sometimes there could be it could be cloudy and it is not raining. And often, indeed, we must have seen this. But the other way, if rain then clouds, then that must be true, because it cannot rain without cloud. It is a scientific fact we can verify, so it's true. And now when I go outside and see that it is indeed raining outside, it's true, then I can reach to the conclusion that it must be cloudy. We looked at modus ponens and modus tollens, which are two forms of argument. Then I told you that the mind is indeed fallible, that we are governed by this elephant, and reason is more like a rider at the top, and that's the role it has. It can only sort of justify, or often does justify. It doesn't mean it can't go the other way around. And that we are predictably irrational. We are not just irrational, but we are predictably irrational. And so these are some ways in which we are predictably irrational. And these ways are called cognitive distortions. So us versus them thinking, labeling, emotional reason, catastrophizing. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this. And of course, correcting for cognitive distortion also corrects for mental health. So again, I let me know how you like this format. Do you think it was helpful to have this sort of a write-up kind of thingy to speak to you on live stream? If it was, let me know, and I will be sure to do more of these. But otherwise, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully, next time someone is using a bit of a shady argument, hopefully you're able to point it out. Hopefully you're able to see it, and hopefully this helps you think a little better. If this has piqued your interest, then you can check out my Instagram, where I list some of the cognitive distortions and give some examples, which is a bit more visually pleasing. And then I highly recommend that you check out, I'll put another link on the list of cognitive distortions down below, which are more than just what I listed here. Happy thinking, happy sanity, happy reason. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.